long before I even got close to thinking about what that was. But awesome. If there was one major takeaway that you'd want people to have today, what would it be?
I think it really is about when you're trying to build a startup, focus on the business aspects more than on the sort of the technical and the product aspects. I think most of the founders I talk to are so into the nuts and bolts of what they're doing that they haven't looked at the bigger picture, how it fits in, and that's doubly true when they're thinking about fundraising.
Ooh, so true.
All right, welcome in to Vision Pros Live with Jackson Callum. I'm your show host. We'll be doing interviews for visionary entrepreneurs and guest leaders who are building fantastic visions out there.
Hey, what's up, and welcome in Vision Pros. My name is Jackson Callum. I'm your host. So excited to have you on today. We have a wonderful guest named Lance Cottrell, and Lance has a lot of experience in the startup world. He has had exits. He's still part of the board from one of his long-term exits. He has a whole lot of insight when it comes to entrepreneurship and business ownership. So if that's you, if you're one of those serial entrepreneurs or young startup entrepreneurs, or you're a seasoned entrepreneur but looking to look over the shoulder of somebody who's been at this for several decades, then you're in for a real treat today. He's also an expert in I almost said cryptocurrency. That's not the case. It is cryptography, online privacy, internet security. We probably won't dive too deep into those aspects, but the cool thing is, if that's something that you need to know more about for the sake of protecting the vulnerability, the privacy of your users, then he's probably a fantastic person to reach out to and talk to about that as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about his story before I bring him on stage. But first up, I want to derail a little bit towards our sponsorship. So iconmakerlive.com. Go check it out. Go see what the event was about. Icon Maker has is helping icons launch their brands. We're talking about influencers. We're talking about the creator economy. We're talking about people who want to make a massive global impact while also building a 7-figure business. Check that out. There's Tom in the room. It was such a cool setup to work to be presenting on stage at this studio called Sage in Charleston, South Carolina. But more importantly, there was 300 people who had tuned in online to figure out how do they launch a podcast successfully? How do you run a business? Tom Matson ran an amazing mastermind, and session after session after session, him and Cheryl Pluff as well, both dove deep. Danella ran an amazing event. I've never been part of a better event. And what's really cool is they had never run an event together themselves. It was the first time they all came together. So the fact that they pulled that off and then outdid 50 plus events that I've been to, and over 500, I should say 50 plus conferences that I've been to, and over 500 events that I've participated in, like, they're hands down amazing. So check out what's going on over at Icon Maker Live and Capshow, CAPSHO.com. This is the number one ranked AI content creator for podcasts by digitalmarketer.com. And they go above and beyond that. So if you have any type of content, if you have any type of video or audio content that you have not repurposed yet, that you've not built what is often called in the content world a digital waterfall or a content waterfall, then just take your episode or your file, upload it into capshow.com. They give you a couple of free credits with the affiliate link that we have, and you'll be able to click buttons to get social media posts generated and sound bites pulled from that as well. It's an amazing technology that can help you get your content ready to go, so you can just copy and paste that information right onto your social media platforms and get that distributed between tools like Go High Level, where they provide you a social planner to get these things scheduled, or Social Oomph, which allows you to create evergreen content that gets reposted at random on sites like Twitter. You can take Capshow and that tool, and for pretty much less than, I think it's less than $100 between the two, and you can take Opus as well on top of that, and you've got a phenomenal strategy to get your content out there without having to be plugged into it on a day-to-day basis. That can be very helpful when you consider that the top of your funnel, if you are working on your marketing, understanding marketing, and you look at that funnel, there's the people who will buy from you at the bottom of the funnel. But at the top of the funnel, a lot of people forget the importance of the top row. The top row is distribution. You've got to get your message in front of more people. The more people you get your message in front of, the more likely you're going to come across what's called the low-hanging fruit. That would be the 5% of your market who is ready to take action here and now. It's very important to get yourself in front of more people in order to be able to focus more on constantly trying to convince people to do business with you. Not the best approach. Then last, and of course not least, we've got the Water Project. The Water Project is one of my favorite charities on earth. Please just consider going and giving $5, $10, $15 to it. Take a look at the projects that they have going on as well. These kids, their families, their moms, their dads, they don't have access to clean drinking water. And this organization goes out and either plans what's called a sand dam or a borehole well or something similar to help them get access to clean drinking water, because they're either drinking extremely unsanitary water or they're walking miles and miles away to bring water back to their village. And that creates discord with other people. That keeps kids from going to school because they have to carry these buckets long distances and go get water rather than being educated. This absolutely changes people's lives in so many ways. And I love being able to see exactly how you help and the outcome of what occurs, and you'd have the same opportunity. And you get an email alert every time there are little updates about the community, so you can see the progress of the good that you've done by simply giving a few of your dollars to contribute to that. And I don't think there's many better causes out there in the world than helping people get water. So thank you for hearing me out on that. Without further ado, Lance Cottrell, thank you so much for being here today. Let's dive right in. Welcome to Vision Pros.
Thanks so much. Great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So, Lance, there's so many things that we could dive into with your years of experience. The first place we'll start is kind of simple, but super pointed. Who should be listening today? Why should they listen to you? And what are they going to get out of today's show?
So who should be listening? I really am focused on early stage founders. So the content that I create, a lot of the work that I do now is oriented around helping them be more successful. So we're talking from idea stage through, pre-seed or seed, maybe as late as A, but I really like to work at that stage where the company is in this formative process. They should talk to me probably for two reasons. One is I've been there. I had a very successful startup, went through a pivot. I've done B2B and B2C in that context. And then after that, I became an angel investor, and I'm now on the board of directors of the North Bay Angels. I run our selection committee, so I see huge numbers of startups come through, and I've developed a really refined insights into what makes them successful, both as companies and what makes them successful at fundraising. And I've also parlayed that into being a global entrepreneur in residence at the Founder Institute. So kind of my whole life revolves around startups.
Nice. That's awesome. So you said early stage, which is not necessarily 18-year-old founders. These could be founders that are also 48, 58, 68 that are getting their feet wet for the first time with the process of starting a company. Is that correct?
Absolutely. In fact, I found many of my favorite founders are ones that have been in industry for, some significant chunk of a career, partly because they really understand the market. They understand the problems. They have deep insight into the customers that they're trying to support and address in most cases. And, that's a whole different world than someone who's just come out of an entrepreneurship program, just graduated college, and they want to do a startup, but there's often much less understanding of the why around what they're doing.
I love that. And I've seen that myself as well. You can't replace the experience that comes from being able to be exposed to the pain, the nuisances, the problems that exist in the market that only come from being in the market for 5 to 10 years first. Not to discredit the young bucks that do have intuition come their way. So, Lance,
right. Intuition and energy.
And the energy, right? That's true too. That is super true. With the young ones, you got a lot of energy that I can't compete with these days anymore, even at just 35. So I can only imagine what I feel like at 55. So, all right, there was, you mentioned your success. Let's quantify that a little bit. So the success of your first company, what does that look like? What are the details?
So it ended up running for 13 years. And I have to say, when I started the company, I had zero clue what I was doing. But I was passionate about privacy. I'd been building privacy tools in the open source community for some time while I was doing my PhD in astrophysics, and decided that that's really where my passion was. So in 1995, I put the PhD on permanent hold and created Anonymizer, which was a consumer privacy company. And we grew that to probably 1 million active users, 100,000 paying subscribers. We survived the 2000 .com collapse. And then after that, actually, today's the anniversary, 9/11 happened, and it really got us thinking about how we could contribute in a more substantive way. And we ended up discovering that the government had a need for privacy and anonymity. Right? They needed to be able to go after bad guys and not be identified for obvious reasons. I would have assumed this was a solved problem, but it turns out that they really didn't have good solutions for it. And so we started building tools for them. And within 3 years, that was 95% of our revenue. We were on this crazy hockey stick going up. And then we eventually sold the company a couple of years later in 2008, largely because I didn't know that customer, right? I didn't come from that, DoD, intelligence community, national security community kind of background. So I didn't have the access and I didn't have the insight that I needed. And I figured the best way to maximize the potential success was to pair up with a company that did that.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's really neat. So you took a strategic pivot because of your own weaknesses that you were able to be self-aware enough about, and also probably to align further with your passions, is kind of what it sounds like. Don't let me feed you words, though. You can.
No, I mean, absolutely, it was a passion. It felt like it was a way of doing something that was going to have an impact on the world. But it's also an example of one of those sort of wild coincidence opportunities. The way we ended up doing the pivot was we were being subpoenaed by the local FBI cybercrime group. And we did consumer privacy. That was not a rare occurrence. But this time it occurred to us to actually ask them how they addressed this issue. And they sort of admitted that, well, largely we think people aren't watching that closely, but if we think someone's going to see that we've got an FBI IP address, we'll use the Starbucks down the street. And I said, wait, we got to talk. And they actually became our first customer in the government and really opened the floodgates for us.
Oh, nice. Okay. Was this a 6-figure exit, 7-figure, 8-figure, or not possible to reveal?
Can't share that publicly.
Okay, that's fair. Very good. Then go ahead.
I've got a big house and a vineyard in wine country.
Okay. Well, that's a decent way to quantify it. Thank you for that. And you don't rent it for the sake of the videos.
Right.
All right.
And when I do this advising, I do it all for equity because I'm not particularly concerned about cash flow.
Right. Let's see here. So what does passion for privacy look like? One thing that came to mind was a tin hat, and hiding in a closet. But I have a feeling there's a different angle to this. So what does that look like to you?
Yeah, I mean, I really became aware of as the internet was exploding. And remember, this was early on. I was building privacy tools in 93, and I think the World Wide Web was invented in 92. And of course, the internet had been around for a while, but it became immediately obvious just how much data was being collected on people by large corporations, by governments. And so the thought was, how do you allow people to take some control of that back on a personal level? And so we ended up working with human rights groups. We did some big projects to censorship circumvention and allow anyone to use the internet freely from within China, within Iran, bypassing all of their sort of oversight systems. And then, of course, with the government, allowing them to be able to go out and do the things they needed to do to keep us safe. I remember I was talking to one customer and said, what is driving you to buy the solution? What do you need? And this was a covert communications platform, so people could do undercover chat from this country. And he said, well, we have a bunch of people in this hot, sandy country, and one of them turned out to be unreliable, tipped off the bad guys, and all of the other dozen people who were working with us ended up minus their heads in a ditch, and we don't want that to happen again. And you're like, okay, that's a pain point, and you can get up in the morning every day trying to address that kind of thing.
Right, absolutely. Now, you seem like too nice of a guy and too positive, too happy of a guy to be in this space. And here's what I mean by that. When we look at documentaries or we look at people who are into privacy, I mean, there's so much fear that is talked about, expressed, utilized in this, not only like big governments taking all of your data and hate Mark Zuckerberg and let's get our pitchforks and torches and go just complain about it. I guess that's the today's world view of how to do something. But so how do you balance that? You got this demeanor that says you're a really nice guy and I could just have lunch with you and talk about cool things in life. But you're also involved in an industry that is so tightly guarded and angry. Maybe that's not fair, but that's what I see.
I mean, certainly there are some people, and there are definitely a lot of extremists out there. For me, I'm very pragmatic about privacy. I think that people don't have a lot of control over their information, and there certainly are people trying to spy on you. But at the same time, we want the benefits of being able to engage in these things. Like I always think it's fascinating when people say, "I want privacy on Facebook." I'm like, I don't even know what those words mean in that combination, right? You want to be able to share all the personal details of your life without them being accessible to other people. So it is a funny thing, and I try to really focus on what are the things that I care about protecting. Because if you're trying to protect everything, you're effectively protecting nothing. So be very specific. Know what it is that you're trying to guard, and guard that carefully, and then relax. I'm not worried about Facebook because I don't post things that I'm worried about on Facebook.
Yes, I love that. And you're right. That is very much a mindset of, I would say, if you haven't thought through, what it is that you should be protecting in life and shouldn't be, and you can actually be scared of everything if you'd like to be, but that doesn't necessarily help you live life. So in 30 seconds, what's your vision for those of you, sir? What's your vision for these early stage entrepreneurs?
So really, I want to help them climb the vertical learning curve, because there is nothing that prepares you to be a founder, except having been a founder before.
Right.
You've got to know everything on every topic. It's an utterly unrealistic expectation. And so I'm trying to provide both sort of educational materials, but also sort of direct feedback to help people get up to speed really quickly, discover the things that are their blind spots, learn how to compensate for those things so that they can then build a successful business. Because if they're just floundering around, they're not going to get to where they're trying to go.
Yes. And there's so much depth of truth to all of that. So how accessible are you to these early stage founders, Lance? You're accessible to me. You came on my show, so I appreciate that.
For sure. Yeah. So it's pretty easy to get a hold of me. All the content that I've created is free. It's all up at feeltheboot.com. And that name came from some of the people I was advising spontaneously began referring to me as the boot. And I decided to lean into that. But feeltheboot.com has all these articles on all aspects of the startup process. It's also a YouTube channel, so it's all available there as videos as well. Through that, I do office hours. So I've got free office hours. Anyone who's interested and signs up for my newsletter can get on my calendar to get a 15-minute session. I also offer paid advising for people who need longer chunks of time or want to get on sooner, because the free stuff does tend to book up. I take on some clients as formal advisees, but not so many. And then I also do advising through Founder Institute, which is an accelerator program. And there I work with cohorts in a number of different cities, primarily San Diego, San Francisco, Toronto, London, and Tunisia.
Oh, cool. Awesome. That's fun. So,
yeah, Tunisia's an interesting one, right? The kind of
hit it.
businesses and the kind of problems that they have are very different than the kinds of problems that you see coming out of, say, London or Silicon Valley. And so it stretches your brain a little bit to try to help them navigate their unique kinds of issues.
Absolutely. What are a couple of those examples?
So one of the first is that a large fraction of the population is fundamentally unbanked. So a lot of the sort of payment mechanisms that you might assume you have access to don't exist there. There's a lot of issues with corruption. There's societal expectations. If you're trying to do fintech, there's both problems and opportunities, because in most Islamic countries, you can't borrow or lend money. But yet people still need financing for things. And so you've got to go about things in other kinds of ways. So it really does raise a lot of interesting problems.
Interesting. Thomas Friedman wrote a book a long time ago called The World is Flat. And it's one I really enjoyed reading during my college years. And it talked about how all these countries are starting to kind of arrived at the same level. And I love the vision, I love the dream, but I mean, you brought up something critical right there. It's not even close to level in many of these countries. They have so far to go.
Yeah, no, they're coming up fast and often hugely disparate, right? So there is an upper class in most of these countries that does have access. They've got great internet. They've got access to all of these things. And then there's the, 95% of the population, which is, in the Iron Age in some cases, and they got a long ways to go to try to get access to these capabilities. But it's funny how they're leapfrogging whole technologies. Like they're not going to put in cable systems or telephones to every house, but everyone does have a cell phone. And so they're now suddenly getting access to all sorts of things, bypassing whole stages that we spent decades going through.
Right. Absolutely. And it's interesting because I don't think without help from people like yourselves, they would have as much propensity to magnify the opportunity, right? That's the whole point of having somebody come in who's been there and done that with the technology, that has those decades of experience, bridging the gaps that you just don't necessarily see or understand by yourself. So
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of them, yeah, here in America, you at least see entrepreneurs around. We're sort of aware of it. It's kind of in the water a little bit. But in a lot of these places, yeah, it takes a pretty exceptional person to even sort of conceive of this as something that they could go pursue and then go in that direction.
that's also what my South American counterparts concluded when I started our group to help Latin Americans get involved in Fiverr, Upwork, etc. One of my great and smartest friends from down there said, Jackson, we don't grow up learning about entrepreneurship. You guys grow up making lemonade stands, and like learning about how to become entrepreneurs. And we don't have any concept of that down here. We were never taught to think that way from the get-go. So this is completely foreign territory for us as a collective whole. And I was like, wow, that is really helpful insight for somebody who's trying to go and make changes in societies that don't necessarily have access to some of that. I'm going to switch gears though, back to you early stage entrepreneurs. Might get a kick out of this one. So Lance, what's your worst business experience ever?
I have an embarrassingly large number to choose from here.
Sure.
But I actually did a whole episode of my podcast on my kind of worst day as a founder.
What's your podcast? I need to know this.
So Feel the Boot. Feel the Boot.
Oh, it's Feel the Boot podcast. Makes sense. Oh, all right. I'm going to go back. I'm going to interrupt you. So the boot, you got called the boot. Is this about bootstrapping, or is there some other reference that or is this bootstrapping?
I think it was a motivational kick in the ass is what it was.
Oh, there it is. Good. I like that. We need more. We need more of that in the world.
That's right. No, it's a boot of love, but I don't know. I had fun with that. It's unique. It's not the same kind of business oriented titles you see on so many of these kind of incubators or startups or advisories.
My first assistant, who's one of my best friends to this day, called me the steel bat. So I think the boot would have been better, but I did have to learn to tone it down a little bit, or a lot of it. All right, so your worst business experience.
Yeah, so this was in 2000 as we were going into the teeth of the dot-com collapse, and but we were in a good spot. We had an angel investor who was about to write $1.5 million check into the company, and we had an offer to acquire the company from a bigger security company at was it like 12 million? It was pretty modest, but we were really over a barrel at that point, and hemorrhaging a fair amount of cash. But we're like, okay, we have investment, and we have this deal. Over the course of a couple of weeks, as the economy started to tank, the angel pulled out and he was gone. Got no investment from him. No one else was investing at this point. So money coming in was not an option. And while we were negotiating with the acquirer, their stock price went from $30 a share to $3 a share. And this was going to be an all stock deal. So suddenly this was turning into being, a fairly substantial fraction of their net worth and their company size. So that didn't make sense for them. They pulled out. And I think we had, 4-6 weeks of working capital in the bank, basically a 6-week runway. And we buckled down and rode out 18 months with never more than 6 weeks of capital in the bank before we were able to really get things right sized, start getting some investment, grow the company some more, and then accelerated out of that trench. But that was a rough year and a half. Oh, and the week that that deal fell through and the acquirer pulled out, my father-in-law died.
Oh man,
So that was
that's rough timing.
that was a rough time. So, and I must have had at least 10 times when the company was just within a whisker of total annihilation. And we were able to, just grit, strong fingernails, hold on, and whatever we needed to do to, struggle through. We sort of at some point started calling it the cockroach strategy because, after the nuclear annihilation, the cockroaches will still be walking around.
Jeez, yes. So what are some of the things you guys did to hang on for dear life?
So we laid off some people, right? We downsized, and we just became utterly laser focused on immediate returns, right? We did not spend a penny that could not generate, a multiple return on like a 30-day time horizon. So everything just narrowed down to like you're looking through a straw. You cannot be distracted. You can't think about any kind of long-term strategic things. You just have to be there the next day. Then eventually you'll be able to do the strategic things, once that starts to open up. You discover that there's efficiencies you didn't think you had. When suddenly everything depends on it, you discover the kinds of things that you can eliminate or save money on or tighten down. We'd be almost out of money, and you're like, I wonder if we could send out a renewal notice to people 2 weeks earlier. Okay, boom, there's another, $20,000 in the bank. That'll give us another week to go. You just had to get insanely scrappy around these things. And it also sort of gave me a very relaxed worldview about things. People will be in a panic about some situation in their business. And I'm like, no, this is not a crisis. I've seen crisis. This is not a crisis. Relax. We'll just, unpack this and work out what the next steps are.
That's a powerful mindset. That every entrepreneur benefits from understanding how to go through. A lot of us didn't grow up close enough to the Depression era to get that. To get that mindset inherited. I was fortunate. My parents inherited that pretty strongly from my grandparents. And then there's Pearl Harbor. There's this scene in the movie Pearl Harbor where they have to fly the planes across to, I believe it is Japan, and these planes were not designed to make that flight. And so they're stripping down the plane, everything they can. They get it down, stripped down. They're still not even close to where they're going to make it. And so they start taking out the seats, and the buckles, like everything that you could possibly imagine. They had stripped down, and they're now stripping out more. They're basically destroying the aircraft in order to be able to complete this mission. And it reminds me a lot of, again, what you have to do during scrappy times during startups. So.
Yeah, right. Things that you would, under normal conditions, never consider. Like, no, these are essential things, suddenly become not essential anymore.
Yes.
I was holding board of directors meetings at a local bar because they had free food at happy hour. So,
cool. That's a good find.
Because that couple $100 of food was not meaningless to us at that point.
Right. Exactly. Nice, man. I love that. So let's talk about the best experience in business. What's your best experience in business so far?
I think it was probably one of my favorite ones was getting to do that project. It was actually a contract to the Voice of America to do the censorship circumvention into China and Iran, right? And being in a position to help 100,000 people roughly in each country get free access to information and free expression and all of that sort of thing. That was incredibly rewarding. And the feedback from customers, I think, as well, knowing that you're doing things that are having meaningful impact on lives. It's not, some new widget or something like that. It's life-changing for the people who are using it. And that was hugely rewarding.
That's amazing. That's awesome. That might steer you in this question, or you might decide to shake it up. So what's another powerful? You've already shared many, but this is one of my favorite questions to keep diving into. And I'm glad we have the time. what's another powerful lesson these visionary early stage entrepreneurs can learn from your experience, Lance?
I think probably two. One is keeping an open enough mind to get luck, right? Luck is sort of something that happens when you are ready for it and you're keeping your eyes open. So it's really easy to get too laser focused in on exactly what you're doing. And then opportunity walks in the door and you didn't even see it, right? You didn't recognize it. And that kind of goes back to that situation where we were, converting the people subpoenaing us. And we had other sort of situations like that. And I think that also ties to what I call sort of strong convictions loosely held. I think that's the key to a lot of startups is the odds of you being right about your initial business model and the first direction you're going aren't good, right? Statistically, most successful companies have had major pivots, often several of them. But at the same time, you can't always be looking for the greener grass on the other side. It might not be. So there's this kind of Goldilocks zone where you need to be totally committed to what you're doing and ready to abandon that and move in a different direction when there's sufficient evidence to show that's the right move to make. And, because it's just so easy to get so locked into the plan you had. And was Eisenhower said, no plan survives first contact with the enemy.
Ah, yes. Oh man, both super powerful. So, and I see it a lot, especially in the space that we serve. So your background with early stage startups and entrepreneurs, they are. By the way, so one of my first companies was a SaaS company, as was my second. And the mentality of those companies versus the ones that I typically work with these days is very different attitudes. I work with mostly coaches and influencers and the creator economy. And these individuals, they get into it more so for the desire to impact on an extreme level. Like a coach, for instance, they don't normally get into coaching because they want to make a bunch of money. They get into coaching because they want to make an extreme impact on the world. They want to have this legacy of helping others. And then they start to understand that, oh man, I need a business strategy to survive. And the entrepreneurs, the startups, the ones that are, following the Jeff Bezos, the Steve Jobs of the world, that's kind of their hero persona per se, or the Elon Musks. They're kind of going into this, hey, I have a business idea in mind. I have something that I want to invent and create, and I know it's going to be successful. And I better learn about business as much as possible in order to create this. They're very different ways of looking at how you shape reality, move forward. So both of them, I would say, have a different unique challenge of playing with luck and missing the opportunity in front of them. Right. So I'm glad you bring it up because I'm internally this for myself as much as for anybody else. But in the coaching cases, they're not used to business people approaching them. They don't know how to deal with it. They don't know how to think through it. They see somebody presenting a case study. Hey, here's how we can help you grow, as somebody who's coming after them, ready to shark and eat them alive. And they then end up turning their nose up to it rather than understanding how to build a strong filter around recognizing the difference between Jackson Callum as a startup advisor, Lance Cottrell as a startup advisor, and Grant Cardone. They don't know how to assess the three difference, or your giant venture capitalists that may not have their best interest at heart, or may, depends on which venture capitalists. But how would you go about then breaking that down further, rather than just looking at it from the good luck event, but saying, okay, if you've got an advisor coming in to talk to you about your growth, what are some of the core strength aspects you'd look at? And what are some of the red flags that they should also consider saying, whoa, that's something that's kind of on the scary side that they might not recognize on their own?
I think business model is often one of the biggest red flags, right? How aligned are your interests with the people you're working with? I see, for example, a lot of cases where people say, well, I will help you do fundraising. And so if you pay me $50,000, I'll help you raise $1 million. Is that refundable? No, right? And so why can you trust this? I'm always telling people to do reference checks on all of these people, right? Talk to some other people that they've helped and really dig in to see, has this been successful? What are these people able to bring forward? Are they sharing information freely? Like my approach to establishing my credibility and credentials as an advisor is this mountain of free content that I put out, as well as, free advising office hours. It's like, come in, try the goods, give me, talk to me, see whether this is useful. If it's useful, I think it'll be obvious to both of us pretty quickly that this is useful. Then we can establish that relationship. But I'm not asking anyone to take it on faith.
Nice. That openness, and centeredness as a leader. I'll also throw that in there, Lance. It takes a special type of person in the business world that has a base of success to still remain open to the public. I commend you for that. I don't see that a lot. And like I don't think that Richard Branson's necessarily bullying anybody to move forward in meetings with him, or like saying, hey, I'm unapproachable. I think he's the extreme case where he's got so many millions of people coming his way that he's got to find ways to protect his time. But at the same time, I have a feeling and it's Gary. You know who Gary Vaynerchuk is? You know who that is? Yeah. Like he's the type of guy, I think Richard Branson probably is too, that will spend some time with people on the street, right? Everyday folk, and say, hey, let's engage on a real one-on-one basis. Now we can't do that with everybody. There's some luck that comes into being one of the people who's drawn out of that. But I think everybody who's listening right now, I hope you stay aware there's people out there like that who will give you the time. And you got to be ready to have that conversation when it happens. You don't want to miss the buck and miss that opportunity. So, Lance, how do you go about advising people on how to do their reference checks?
I mean, I think really it is, don't be worried about that power dynamic. So when you've got an investor coming to you, or when you've got an advisor or some service provider, I think it is not offensive to just directly say, hey, I want to understand what this relationship might look like. I want to understand what it's going to be like working with you. I know you're doing due diligence on me. I'd really like to be able to talk with some folks you've worked with in the past to understand, is this going to be a good fit? Right? Can we work together effectively? And if someone pushes back on that, that's a huge red flag, right? That suggests to me that you probably want to run the other way, or start doing a lot of Googling to see whether you can find people saying, bad things about working with that individual. My experience is most people are more than open to, allowing you to kind of have that access.
Nice.
It's funny, you were just talking about Richard Branson. One of the companies I'm advising, super early stage founder, but just through opportunity and networking, ended up getting invited to one of the big gatherings on Branson's private island for a week, and had made all sorts of amazing connections with the other people who were out there. But made that effort to be in the network, to talk to people, to create a situation in a space where those opportunities can happen, and then recognizing and jumping when they do.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I think that part of that, everybody who's listening, has to do with mindset. As you open your mind to that reality existing, and you leverage the principle that Lance talked about. It might seem super simple, but I know there's so many people out there who don't see it this way. Especially if you come from like the MLM world, there's a lot of high pressure tactics that make you feel like, man, this is your last shot. This is your only opportunity. And if you've been involved in that community too much, it's important to test this concept that Lance is talking about. Break free of that mentality and say, you know what, red flag, I'm not touching it. Red flag, I'm moving on. Some will, some won't. So what next? Which is also an MLM concept. But you've got plenty of leaders out there who are willing to take you under their wing. And if you don't know Lance, or you're not comfortable going to him yet, I would advise you to check out the small, medium business development centers and universities because they have free access to coaching. But what I would do is I would go to them and I would go to Lance to get a different perspective of how they both look at your business opportunities and situations, because one's going to come with a whole lot of university background and not necessarily the expertise of having done it, versus Lance, who's had the opportunity to be in the trenches for many years of running a startup. What's your thoughts on the business development centers that are out there?
I think they're great. I mean, you have the opportunity to do in-person meetings, which is advantageous. And these people usually have a lot of experience. They're talking to a lot of startups. So yeah, it's a hugely valuable asset. I think co-working spaces often have an opportunity to network with other founders, sort of, effectively creating a mastermind that you can work with and learn from. Really, you want to have a diversity of advisors because every advisor comes with their particular experience and skill set and biases. And so I try to be kind of take as much heat off the ball as I can when I'm giving advice, particularly if it's sort of not absolutely mainstream advice, because it might or might not work for you. You should talk to more people. You should get more opinions, because a lot of these things are contentious. And you'll hear different kinds of advice. So talk to multiple people, get feedback. And if you have a really strong opinion about something and you talk to 5 advisors and they all tell you to do something different, that's the time to start embracing some humility and think about that.
Yes.
I talked about this, I remember a while back in context of power in a company, and someone was really worried about losing control and getting below 50% ownership. And I said, well, look, if you're bringing in a bunch of investors and, there's a dozen people on your cap table, maybe, or more by the time you get below 51%, that's not a magic number, right? The only way you lose a vote with 49% and a dozen people on the cap table is if 100% of them show up to vote and all vote against you. And if that's happening, you probably should be listening, right?
Right.
It's highly likely they have a good point, and you should be engaging with that. And I think that's just sort of universally true, is always be open to questioning. And founders, I think, can often get a little tunnel vision, but yeah, listen to your employees, listen to your advisors, listen to your customers. Always be open to the fact that you may be running down the wrong track or getting it wrong, and be prepared to reevaluate that.
Dude, that one clip right there is golden. Thank you. I mean, everything you've talked about, but that particular concept can protect so many founders against themselves, and our greatest strengths are often our greatest weaknesses. So I love that.
That's right, because it takes a huge amount of ego to be a founder, right? Inherently, it's sort of an insane thing to do. But at the same time, yeah, you want to be servant leader. You want to really understand what you don't know. And of course, at the end of the day, you're going to have to hire other people to do things who won't do it as well as you, because those are things that you can delegate. And there are so many things as a CEO that you can't delegate. You're literally the only person who can do it. That ends up being your whole job, and everything else has to go to other people. And you kind of need to let them learn, right? You can't micromanage that. It doesn't scale.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to go back to one quote you said, because it's one that on the fringes, I think I understand it, but it would be one that's like, I know this is a powerful quote that would help me as well as others to break down. You said, strong convictions loosely held. What does that mean from your perspective?
Yeah, so it does mean kind of utter commitment to the direction you're going. We've decided this is our strategy, this is our target customer, this is the solution that we want to build to address the problem. And you need to have not only commitment from yourself, all in that direction without distraction, and from your whole team, but at the same time knowing that you might be wrong about that, right? As you're validating, as you're testing, as you're going to market, always kind of being aware that you may need to revisit that, and at some point drop that thing that you were, had high conviction about, and pick something new to absolutely commit to and run towards. And so that's the held loosely. You need to be able to sort of find that. It's a bit of a paradoxical mind state, but to have the flexibility as well as the passion and focus.
Yes, I love it. So in terms of a physical symbolism, because I'm big on symbolism, that would be like a pitcher, a baseball pitcher with the confidence to throw a fastball or a curveball, but you're going to hold that ball with a certain degree of care, or a robot that's holding a massive container, freight container of delicate goods. You have to hold it confidently, but at the same time, you can't crush it like a tin can. Otherwise, you end up ruining the goods inside. The same is true with our dreams and our passions and our visions. We got to have that care and that ability to pivot, but at the same time, the confidence that we're going to move this vision forward. So Lance, this was a massive help to everybody who's listening. Thank you so much for being here. Vision Pros, we hope you took notes. We hope you go back and listen to some of these truths. We also hope you take the opportunity to reach out to Lance. Lance, they can reach out to you on LinkedIn. Is there somewhere else that you also prefer to be contacted?
So LinkedIn is great. And if you just go to feeltheboot.com, there's a contact page right there. And I'm always happy to respond and answer questions.
Excellent, guys. Everybody have a phenomenal rest of your day, and we will see you on the next show. Take care.
Thank you for being here today. I'm really happy that you tuned in to Vision Pros Live. I'm looking forward to seeing your reactions as these episodes continue to move forward. This is going to get more and more fun. We'll have more and more engagement as well. We'll invite people to participate in the show. And thank you for giving us your time.